got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good evening, you're with GB News. The top story this hour. The Home Secretary has said that decent British people have had enough of thuggish intimidation and extremism displays. That comes after the Met Police asked protest organisers to urgently reconsider plans for demonstrations in London during Remembrance commemorations this weekend. Senior police officers say they're concerned by the danger posed by breakaway groups who they think are intent on fuelling disorder. The Met held talks with organisers today, but requests to postpone the protests were declined. Meanwhile, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres says Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. He said the protection of civilians must be paramount in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. He said Israel's ground operations are hitting civilians, hospitals and UN facilities. He also said Hamas is using civilians as human shields and continues to launch rockets towards Israel. Here at home, laws designed to provide a minimum level of cover during strikes have been extended now to ambulance staff, rail workers and Border Force employees. Train staff will be asked to operate 40% of their normal timetable, while border security staff will have to keep all airports open during strikes. The Minimum Service Level Act passed early this year, but has faced criticism from trade unions who say it threatens their right to strike. Now, in the United States, Donald Trump has been facing a civil fraud trial that threatens his property empire. The former US president is accused of inflating the value of his properties by over £1.65 billion to secure favourable terms. Losing the case could mean significant financial consequences, but it comes as Mr. Trump currently leads in the polls, leading in 5 swing states. Here at home, Thames Water admits 12,000 customers in Surrey are still having difficulty with domestic water supplies a week after blaming Storm Ciarán for affecting water treatment works. Customers say they've been unable to bathe, shower or flush toilets, as well as having to wait in long queues for bottled water at nominated pick-up points. Schools and nurseries in the area closed today, with students returning to lockdown-style online lessons. Yesterday, Thames Water declared a major incident and apologised to customers for the problems, adding that engineers are working to fix what they're calling a technical fault. And lastly, Luton Town Football Club has threatened to ban any fans found to have taken part in chanting about the Hillsborough disaster during Sunday's 1-1 draw with Liverpool. The club has launched an internal investigation after chants which indirectly referenced Hillsborough were heard during the match. Luton Town has apologised to anyone offended by the chants, adding they were extremely disappointed. The club is reviewing CCTV and media footage now from the match to identify the individuals concerned. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Time now for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight I'm joined by the alt-right's answer to the Chuckle Brothers, Theo Kearse and Nick Dixon. Both well, gentlemen?
Yes. Yeah, the Chuckle Brothers, because
yes.
only one of them's still alive.
That's a Chuckle Brother now, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I don't know whether you can do that on your own.
I'm just thinking, why give the people on Twitter actual names to use against us? You know what I mean? Why give them that much ammunition?
Yeah, I know. On the other hand, alt-right is kind of, it's a bit faded now anyway, isn't it?
You're right.
You're talking about the Chuckle Brothers.
The Times called Jordan Peterson alt-right the other day. That's when you know they've jumped the shark.
Very much adjacent, wasn't he? He was in the car park. Anyway, let's have a look at the front pages. The Daily Mail. They lead with Poppy Seller, 78, punched by protesters. The Times, thousands to be spared cancer with 4p a day pill. The Sun have Eco Harry flies to Katy Perry gig on oil tycoon's jet. The Mirror, Michelle Moan's shock. Finally, she admits PPE link. The iNews have Green King forced to announce shredding of eco policy. The Metro, 300,000 get drugged to avoid breast cancer. And those were your front pages. So an unusually diverse collection there, no great consensus on what is the main story of the day. What did the Mirror go with, Leo?
So it's the Mail. So Poppy Seller caught up in a pro-Palestine rally said that he was punched and kicked by a mob of protesters, and he's a 78-year-old army veteran. So, you know, he's one of the last people who should be being kicked and punched. So he said, I was getting shoved backwards. There's a picture on the front cover of the throngs. There's 1,200 people there, which is just shy of the number of people who are murdered and kidnapped in Israel. And a huge throng around him. And he said, I was getting shoved backwards in danger of falling, and one of them stood on my foot and split my toe. So I thought, I've got to get the money out of here, because I mean he's in Scotland, so somebody is going to run off with it. Buy another Poppy-related product.
You can say that.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously in Scotland they melt down the red poppies to make heroin.
Heroin, it's methadone, isn't it? The plastic ones, isn't it? I think
that's right,
synthetic one, yeah.
That's right. So he went down to pick up the money, and somebody punched him in the back, and then he got another punch in the side, and it's horrific. He was saved by 3 station staff in red jackets, who you can see there. But you got to wonder for the veterans of World War II who are still alive, who are still raising money for veterans who need support. I mean, what did they fight for? They fought to keep Britain free from vicious anti-Semitic mobs, and what do we have in Britain right now? We've got these vicious anti-Semitic mobs who want to. I mean, I'm not saying everybody in these marches wants to wipe out Israel and wipe out Jewish people, but they're certainly marching alongside and chanting the same words as people who do.
I saw a photograph that was widely shared, Nick. I don't know if you saw the same one on Twitter and so on. An old fella with 2 women, like, surrounded by hostile-looking protesters. I don't know if it's the same station. My suspicion is it wasn't. My suspicion is this sort of scene has been playing out around the country.
In London. That was another one. And I saw a video of some people trying to enter the tube with poppies, and a group was stopping them. And you sort of think, why? And it's because it's about a hatred of the West and our entire way of life. Not just... You can be pro-Palestine. Why would that involve punching an old man with a poppy? But there's clearly a hatred, and now they want to just attack anything that represents Britain or Western ideals, whatever it is. And I'm one of these people. I think the march should be cancelled because I was thinking about this today. It's like I care about free speech, but I care about my country more. And I think there is a time when, we don't have in England a sort of written constitution. We don't have some sort of rationalist top-down thing like Marxism. We just have generations who have an instinct for what is right and what is British. And I think the fact that people have polled strongly against staging the march just means that it shouldn't go ahead, because that's what the people of Britain have decided.
And there's a subtle point, because I know a few people have said, in what way is it inappropriate to be marching for peace, assuming that's, you take that, but in what way is it to be marching for a ceasefire? How is that inappropriate on Armistice Day? And the reason it's inappropriate is Armistice Day is not about peace breaking out. It's about the sacrifices that were made in the previous 4 years in the First World War, 5 or 6 years in the Second World War, and so on. The amount of sacrifice, the amount of blood that was spilled in order to protect what it is you return to afterwards, right? Rather than just peace at any cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in favour of the march going ahead, but we should certainly dig a big hole and cover it with leaves and funnel everybody into it.
Well, it kind of feels to me in a way like they are marching into an elephant trap, in a way. I think there's a serious danger of quite a lot of that.
Which side?
It's going to be very interesting. The Tuesday's Mirror, Nick, has a completely different story.
Yeah, this is about Michelle Moe, and they're calling Michelle Moe shock, but the shock has inverted commas, as if to say it's not a real shock. And the headline is, finally she admits PPE links. So after 3 years of denying she had anything to do with the 200 million COVID deal, Baroness changes story. So yeah, it was always said that her lawyer was saying she's not connected in any way with PPE MedPro. Now lo and behold, she acted as an intermediary liaison between PPE MedPro and the Cabinet Office and so on, and did have something to do with it, and no one's shocked. And this story has been, I mean, The Guardian have been obsessed with it particularly, and the Mirror are running it now. But I realised what bothers me about it is it's sold as a kind of COVID corruption story, and pharmaceuticals and etc. But these papers didn't care about Pfizer, and they're still not going after Pfizer. They didn't care about the general cash-in of the vaccines and so on. They're just going after someone they see as an ideological opponent. That's what bothers me about it.
It's a political opponent, certainly. She represents a kind of like sleazy, low-grade Tory corruption, but I still think she's a wrong. And I also think it's disgraceful the way the upper house is being used in the last few years. I mean, that is always really gets my goat, to be honest.
Politics as a whole, I mean, it was MPs as well as Lords that were taking advantage of these VIP lane contracts. And it's great to see The Guardian doing some proper investigative journalism instead of just trying to convince children to be genderqueer communists and destroy Western society. But I mean, huge amounts of money. You can almost see that during COVID, it didn't look like we were going to have a hard lockdown. Then you see the money signs just go up in every politician's eyes when they realised how many millions they could juice out of the taxpayer.
And I mean, I don't have any close connection with this, but I know one or two people who did have some pretty good schemes and ideas about things that could be supplied to the government and so on, and had a sense of just quite how difficult it was to get any kind of connection, make any kind of contact with the
You're annoyed with the lack of contact allowing you to be corrupt.
I had a van load of PPE.
But you didn't have anyone's number. Couldn't get Hancock's WhatsApp.
But there is, I mean, you hear a lot of sort of, you know, just muttering about. I just feel that was, you know, at least as much of a disgrace. I understand what you mean about the more, you know, significant.
Yeah, I just wish they'd go after everyone. That's all.
Pharmaceutical thing, yeah, absolutely. Well, perhaps in due course we will see iNews now, Leo, and the Green King, which is a slightly annoying pun they've made on a decent brewery.
Yeah, so this is Green King forced to announce shredding of eco-policy, and I genuinely, when I read this, I didn't see the picture of Prince King Harry. What's it called?
Charles.
King Charles.
King Charles.
King Charles.
He's the king of the country.
Like, man, they need to just stick with one. Just stick with one. I'm not like I don't like it when
we did for kind of a long time. To be fair.
Yeah. I mean, his mum made him do that. But when celebrities change their name, like Prince wanted to be known as a symbol and stuff, it's
or the
like
popes when you're like one minute you're Ratzinger and the next minute you're Benedict.
Yeah, just have one pope and stick with that one. Anyway, Green King forced to announce shredding of eco-policy. It's not the pub chain. It is King Charles, who is. Who's obviously, you know, notoriously eco-friendly, talks to plants, talks to left-wing people, and he's being forced to read out the government's anti-eco, King's speech. So
I like the implication that all previous kings and queens speak, or you like the Queen over her 70-year reign was basically on board with a whole raft of legislation on every occasion. It's nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or is it that he has been unusually forthright in his long apprenticip, I suppose?
Exactly. The Queen, nobody knew what she really supported apart from Britain.
As long as he didn't say round up all the corgis, I could assume.
Yeah, do you know, it's probably more productive to talk to plants than a left-wing person, because at least the plants grow, whereas lefty just tells you that you're committing violence.
I mean, it would be interesting to know how he feels about the nation's heritage being besmirched by the Just Stop Oil people, because that seems like that's those kind of protests are...
Yeah, they were edging towards the cenotaph today, weren't they? But this is not really a bit of a non-story, isn't it? Because it's just saying the king won't do anything, he'll just read out the policies, which he has to, so it's not really...
It's said through gritted teeth, but that's how the monarchs always speak.
Yeah, that's how Charles,
speaking like that. It sort of enhances your diction. Finally, the Sun, that's you, Nick, isn't it?
It is me. It's Eco Harry flies to Katy Perry gig in oil tycoon's jet, the royal hypocrite, they're calling him, and he set up this Travellers charity which was about not using private planes. Who would have guessed that Meghan and Harry were not just completely straight shooters? I mean, the Gulfstream jet is co-owned by Oil Air Michael Hurd, and it emits 2 tons of CO2 an hour, even more than Navarra Media. And it is, I just thought of that on the spot. Sorry, guys. Aaron seems all right. But anyway, and so it's, you know, obviously hypocritical. We know this kind of thing. It's just what these people do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of boiled sweet of a story, isn't it? But it is still vaguely grating.
Oh no, this is absolutely relevant. I mean, we've got all these elites like Emma Thompson, Prince Harry, he's not King Harry yet, Katy Perry, all these people who lecture us, the small people, how we're not allowed to fly to Lanzarote on Ryanair once a year, and they're just jetting around in these private jets. I mean, at least fill it with they could fill it with homeless people.
And I've got to be honest with you, I have flown on one occasion on a private jet, which to a corporate gig, and it was already being used. I think his name's Professor Green, rapper.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
And so he was the headliner, and he allowed the rest of us, you know, to use his jet.
Yeah.
They're incredibly uncomfortable by comparison with just
small.
Yeah, you're like sort of sitting like this. Comparison with like flying first class in a decent airliner and being picked up by a limo. There really isn't any. It's not like he's being expected to take the tube, is it?
Yeah,
you know
you're
what I mean?
right. I've only been on Andrew Tate's, so...
Have you? Spinning. Well, that's it for part 1. Coming up, Boris Johnson's greatest cracks. Donald, just for the crack. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I am Simon Evans, joined tonight by comedians Leo Kearse, Nick Dixon. We are into the papers now and over to The Independent, Nick, for the bants from Number 10 and the glory days of COVID.
Yes, our new colleague. It's Boris Johnson called Treasury the pro-death squad during COVID pandemic, inquiry told. And of course, we've got this ludicrous kangaroo court sort of inquiry thing going on at the moment. And what's very frustrating about this is they're saying that there was no direct analysis from top scientists on how the Eat Out to Help Out scheme could impact infection rates. What's kind of annoying about that is there was no analysis of the actual lockdown and how that could affect anything. So that's all they care about. So it's very much sticking with the narrative. I mean, I don't mind Boris using a bit of gallows humour, and maybe you could say it's tasteless to call Treasury the pro-death squad, but Eat Out to Help Out is being demonised. There's no actual looking at lockdown and whether that was worth it, so that's hypocritical. And it's quite normal, actually, for the Treasury to be concerned mainly with money. I think that's like fairly reasonable. You know, Rishi was concerned with money, the Treasury was concerned with money, and then you take their opinion and you make a gestalt of the whole thing, don't you? That's what they're meant to do. So I don't mind that, but they're just saying it like it's a terrible thing, and Sunak pushed back on the Treasury urged Sunak to push back on the circuit breaker lockdown, which was probably a sensible thing as well, so.
I mean, I totally agree with you. That is the Treasury's job. I do think Eat Out to Help Out was a ridiculous scheme. It annoyed me at the time. The one thing I had not missed, to be honest, was like the opportunity to go to restaurants in the evening.
See, these are the words of someone who didn't grow up in a restaurant. So my parents owned a restaurant. That's what we did. So you don't care about hospitality. I do.
No,
I think it was good.
Pubs. I cared about comedy clubs. I cared about theatres and cinemas. But restaurants, and I live in the heart of Brighton and Hove is absolutely the economy is of that kind. But it would have been fine to just have them deliver.
It seemed like it didn't make any sense. Like one moment we're not allowed to even leave our houses. The next moment we're all being paid to jam ourselves in. No, obviously I took advantage of it as much as I could. I went to kebab places and all the rest of it, and they were rammed. And I must have got, I don't know what, I picked up more than COVID. I picked up several kinds of
medieval diseases.
Yeah, I've got typhus.
Exactly.
What didn't make any sense was the lockdown. The Eat Out to Help Out was fine.
I agree.
And you guys just don't, as you prove, you don't care about restaurants.
This bit where they keep saying that Patrick Vallence's belief that Johnson was obsessed with the idea of elderly people accepting their fate.
Yeah.
I just don't buy that. I don't think he was obsessed with it. I think he possibly kind of pushed back a little bit about the idea that we should cripple the economy for generations.
Yeah, he's got naturally libertarian instincts, so he wanted people to be free to make their own choices, which would have been a much better system. The Swedish-style system has been proven to kill fewer people.
Yeah. I'm not sure Boris has the consistency to be obsessed with anything, you know what I mean? Obsessed for a day, maybe.
Briefly distracted.
Yeah. Except his own career. And welcome to GB News, by the way.
Now we move on to, I'm not sure which paper, but the Mail. And means testing means testing.
That's right. So benefits claimants could have their bank accounts checked weekly to make sure they are being honest about savings. This could include the bank accounts indicating that they have more than £16,000 in savings, or an account that regularly transfers money overseas. So this is just as well. I think The Guardian always publishes statistics like only 0.4% of benefits claimants are fraudulent. Man, if only 0.4% of benefits claimants are fraudulent, I must have known every single one of them growing up. Like, it's like it's seen as a career in certain parts of the country. In Scotland, anyway, it's, you know, you work out how to work the benefit system, and yeah, a lot of people. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be. The train spotting era of signing on in 9 different towns.
Well, this is the thing. For a long time, even when it was vaguely computerised, they didn't join it up very much at all, did they? I mean, you still find that with certain departments, like the DVLA don't seem to have access to other departments. Do you know what I mean? Like,
the DVLA don't seem to have access to oxygen.
They're very, very strange. I remember reading some years ago about how, you know, before they had the welfare state at all, you used to have various benevolent societies, you know, and if you did your back in and you couldn't work for a few weeks, you know, the local community and perhaps your industry or whatever.
The church as well.
But the point was, if somebody then saw you down the pub standing upright and you know, I thought you had a bad back, you know, because you would feel some connection with it. I think that might be helpful. I don't know.
I'm a little worried about the authoritarianism. We've seen how carried away governments got during COVID. You really want them to give them access to check everyone's bank account all the time. And I'm wondering, maybe the amount should be lower, maybe 16,000 too much, but I'm not. They're not exactly oligarchs. I'm not sure they're the right people to target. And let's just look at it this way. Does it actually benefit society that much for people to become totally destitute, then sign on, versus having a slight buffer? Because it's really about income, it's not about savings.
I do agree with you there. And actually, I mean, it's a perverse incentive, isn't it? The idea should be to encourage people to make savings against having a rainy day. You don't want people to go, there's no point in saving, because then I will just have to use those savings, and otherwise the government will help me out.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I'd say the amount of benefits claimants has soared in recent years. So we're at 2.7, we're not at 2.7 million now, but we're at 275,000 more than in 2019 before the lockdown.
The issue should be, are you capable of working, rather than have you got 16 grand in the
Yes, and I think maybe housing benefit and things like that are where there's more wastage. I'm just wondering if the savings are the thing to really hammer people on. I'm sure there are other areas. That's probably what I'd say.
Also, you should have a couple of years, especially if you don't go to university, you should have a couple of years when you're in a band, right? Everyone should have a crack at that. I would have thought 23, 24, that's when you knuckle down. But there should be a couple of years of welfare benefit and just living in a large kind of, a squat of some kind, ideally with high ceilings.
That's a great point.
How Danish are we?
We wouldn't have had Oasis without benefits.
None of the great British culture of the last 30 years.
UB40, the obvious one.
Now, away from political theatre for a bit, Nick, as The Guardian explained the intensely serious legal proceedings underway in Manhattan.
Yes, very true. So it's Trump claims financial statements at heart of $250 million fraud trial are worthless. And he took the stand in a Manhattan federal court case and angrily claimed the financial statements were worthless and it was a witch hunt. And of course, that is correct. I mean, the Attorney General, Letitia James, has been tweeting angry things about Trump, obviously hates him. And as someone pointed out earlier on GB, there are no actual fraud victims in this alleged fraud case. And there's the question of the value of the properties. The accusation is Trump overvalued them, but the counter is that the judge is radically undervaluing them, claiming that Mar-a-Lago is worth between 18 and 27 million. Farage earlier estimated it's more like 500 million, maybe more. So yeah, and it's ridiculous. It'll also put people perhaps off New York in general. They'll think they can do this to Trump, they can do it to anyone. It's an absurd witch hunt, we all know.
They certainly have had a stream of cases, haven't they, in America the last couple of years, a lot of them with the Soros attorneys and so on, which do seem to be extraordinary, far more, I don't know, it just seems to me that there's far more stories coming out of America about politically motivated...
Well, yeah, and the justice system, the criminal justice system should be free from political influence. But George Soros is paying, funding these DAs. So in this case, they're prosecuting a political enemy of the Democrats. But in a lot of cases, they actually are very lenient on the friends of the Democrats. People are seen as Democrat voters.
I personally think as well, if you're going to lend somebody money based on the, their own assessment of how much their property is worth, then, you're a mug.
Yeah.
Basically, if you can't be bothered to do your own due diligence before you start handing it. And as you say, he didn't default on these loans, did he? So, it does.
They obviously trusted him. So.
But it's going to be, again, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, I think, because all this is doing is creating a deeper and deeper divide. If you're pro-Trump, you just believe now that Trump is a martyr and, as you say, a witch. And if you hate him, you go, oh my God, I can't believe half the country has voted for this recidivist criminal. Very unhealthy state of affairs. Guardian now, Leo, the greatest danger in a Leeds hospital since the days of Jimmy Savile.
So shouldn't laugh. This is a terrible story, but a patient talked a Leeds hospital worker out of detonating a bomb, a court has been told. So Mahmoud Farouk intended to kill as many nurses as possible in a terror attack, according to the prosecution. I mean, the correct term should be decolonise nurses, I believe, since what's happened in the last month. But this guy, this patient in the hospital, Mahmoud Farouk brought this pressure cooker bomb, the same kind of bomb that was used in the Boston Marathon. Wow. So, incredibly deadly, incredibly effective. And this patient saw him looking unhappy. And thank God, we live in a country where people sometimes reach out to other people. Saw him looking unhappy and went to lift his spirits. And he asked Farouk what was in his bag. And Farouk said, "It's just a bomb." I don't think ISIS are sending us their best people, to be honest.
But you're jesting, of course, but it is worth saying that this apparently wasn't terrorism at all. He just specifically hated the hospital. He felt he had actually been treated badly. I think he had possibly been not given his overtime or something.
He's pleaded guilty to terror offences.
Yeah.
So,
I thought he said he wasn't. He claimed it wasn't terror.
Exactly. He says it's a sense of anger and grievance towards work colleagues, but was not motivated by Islamist extremism. But on the other hand,
he admitted other offences. Possessing a pressure cooker bomb was the big one. He denies preparing acts of terrorism. But look, he said he wanted to kill as many nurses as possible. Can you imagine a less popular attack? I mean, we're not even allowed to criticise nurses. No. I mean, it's horrific. It is horrific. This Nathan Newby guy, though, is a hero because he talked him out of it. It was amazing.
And walked him away while he was talking as well. I think
that is brave.
To get him away, but it is extraordinarily. I don't know what he was ill with. He'll get done for swinging the leg now, only for taking time off. If you're well enough to talk down terrorists, you could have been well enough to go to work that day. Anyway, that's it for part 2. Coming up, Tommy Robinson, KG Hopkins, Matt Hancock, and Anne Frank. You'll never guess which one has been banned. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. We are into the third of 4. Nick, the Guardian now, and 2 old bruisers back in the ring.
Yeah, it's Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson thank Elon Musk for reinstating them on X, and so they're back. Obviously, this will be controversial, but I think they should be on there. I mean, I think we should have the maximum free speech possible, especially in the online space. There's a question about protest. Is that a free speech issue? But why shouldn't they be on there? It's not up for some tech dweeb in Silicon Valley prior to the Musk era to stop them being on there. I can't see any justification. And Tommy Robinson, if we're going to be really honest, it has been proved right on quite a lot of things. I mean, he's a far less respectable figure than Douglas Murray, who basically says the same things with a posh accent.
Funny enough, Douglas Murray, just to interrupt you briefly, defended him quite stoutly at one point.
He did at one point.
The charges against him, the fraud of which he's always a convicted fraudster, was essentially cooked up in order to...
The state had given him a rough time, he said, yeah, and pretty much. So, yeah. I mean, funny enough, he's treated differently in America. People like Gad Sad like him. Jordan Peterson reposted something, whereas in this country he's seen as toxic. But I think they should be on there. Why should it be up to Twitter to decide?
And interestingly as well, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
I had one more thing.
Never made it clear what he'd been banned for, or Hopkins. And whenever the newspapers like The Guardian say far-right activist, you know, and Hopkins, who said that compared refugees to cockroaches, that was in the Sun newspaper. That wasn't in a tweet. That was published like 5 years before.
Sub-editors and everything.
The only thing I was going to add was, I know Josh is not the biggest fan of him, but funnily enough, they have the same views on Israel. So I wanted to be back on Twitter just so I can see Josh retweet him. That's all I'm waiting for, that one moment.
Do you think, though, and I mean, to either of you, do you think it's to do with the timing? Do you think it's to do with Gaza? Do you think it's to do with the armistice march coming up?
If it's not, it is a huge coincidence, because when we're seeing these, there's calls for British people to come out and defend the cenotaph and defend Remembrance Sunday, defend Armistice Day, the weekend when the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian marches could be, you know, creating huge disruption there. And I think as a country we've had a couple of decades now have been absolutely beaten down and told we're racist and terrible and horrible, and in place of any sort of national pride, we've seen horrible ideologies allowed to flourish in amongst us. And Tommy Robinson's first tweet when he came back should have been, "I told you so."
Yeah, it pretty much was.
I mean, he's had that. I remember he was up there during the "Don't Look Back in Anger." That march is after the Ariana Grande, and there was bad mishandling of that by the Manchester police. They sometimes seem. I don't know whether the Met will be like this if it does go ahead on Saturday. The police sometimes seem to quite like to create the maximum friction they can, again, in order to discredit possibly.
Well, that's the question. I mean, it's a bit of a conspiracy to say, is this why they're back now? I don't think so. I think it just takes Musk quite a while with some of these people. But yeah, there's definitely a danger.
There's been a call for them to come. I have noticed a lot of people requesting it.
As you said, but there's a danger in these marches of people getting framed, basically, or made to look as bad as possible.
Almost like that old Far Side cartoon of the insect slowly emerging from the chrysalis over 7 frames and in the 8th flying away and immediately eaten by a frog. It's going to just go straight to the next trap.
Obviously, people don't like the way Tommy Robinson does things, but I think there is an element sometimes of class hatred, which was what I was implying before. You say the same things with a posh education. generation. It's completely
also,
different.
I think when he first started, he definitely did cross lines as far as I was concerned, but he was becoming slightly more nuanced, you know, and has become, as you say, I think he's probably addressed the situation as it's emerging and evolving, and he's become better informed. And
well, in the context of some of the situations, like one of the things he's always chastised for is standing on the pavement, interviewing people outside the trial, which could have jeopardised the trial, put the trial at risk. But everybody was slamming him for standing outside this grooming gang trial and completely ignoring the fact that these men were convicted of the most horrible crimes, like the systematic rape of young girls.
But the argument there was that if he jeopardised that, you know, then they wouldn't get punished, so they'd hate him even more.
Still, at least maybe just say, and also the grooming gang.
I'm not entirely sure I believe those claims anyway. I mean, he was jeopardising it, but still. Daily Mail now, Leo. The SAS have extracted the truth from, or at least about, Matt Hancock.
So Matt Hancock has been told he's really good at lying by SAS officers during the Celebrity Who Dares Wins finale. It's possibly how he got the job as health minister. Yeah, I mean, they do this. He's in this reality TV show. I think this is the nether stages of his career. I know I'm saying that as somebody talking at 11 p.m.
No, it's also at 5 a.m. Don't worry.
Yeah, 5 a.m. and on radio.
Mixed media.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just interesting to see. So he's in this thing. They go through all this SAS training, and now he has this sort of waterboarding and interrogation, putting stress positions and stuff. I wish they'd done this during the pandemic. And Gareth Gates is one of the other people.
Really?
Who, I mean, if these are the people in the SAS, is this the standard of recruit?
I've got to
tell you, annoy them, isn't it?
Imagine.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. It's just I'm a massive fan of the show, and Gareth Gates is brilliant on it. He's incredibly tough and like just handles it all mentally and physically. It's extraordinary, yeah. And Hancock as well has showed incredible grit. That was never really his fault, was it? It was the other stuff.
Well, no, fair enough. If he's got it, he's got it. The one clip I saw, there was quite a short, I mean, quite scary woman, but quite a short, not like a physically threatening woman, shouting at him, and she was using very abusive language, and it was pretty like direct into his face.
Yeah.
I did think, I know it's kind of pantomime anyway, but I did think you've got to have the implicit threat of physical violence, haven't you, behind that kind of thing?
Later there's a big bloke and he poured water on him, but I haven't watched that one yet, but I've seen the clip, so there is that as well. But just briefly, though, the funniest bit to me was they show they let you talk to your family, and this idea is this meant to break you and see if it'll break you. He talked to that woman who he cheated with, and like, of course he didn't break at all. And they were watching going, oh, he's completely fine. Of course he is. He's basically a psycho. He had 2 tiny fake tears. Of course it didn't break him. So his problem has been his attitude and talking back, but he's weirdly good at the
I can imagine
sticking
if that
in there.
was me talking to my family, and like after 2 minutes of being beaten about the tumble dryer,
shut it down.
Come back into the torture. Please. Anyway, Just Stop Oil are back, Nick, and they're obviously irritated at having been eclipsed by a potential military Armageddon that could preempt the environmental one they've been banking on.
Good point. Yeah, it's Just Stop Oil duo smash famous painting in National Gallery and begin shouting at public. Doesn't sound like them. And it was the Rokeby Venus by Velasquez, which they defaced. And they did this as a homage to Mary Richardson, who did the same thing, who was a suffragette, but she was also head of the women's section of the British Union of Fascists, which is so perfect because Just Stop Oil eco-fascists, and so they're doing a tribute to a fascist, and obviously the suffragettes are terrorists as well. That's a less popular view, though, so I won't say that on national TV. But this is what they're doing. They're vandalising art again. It's completely ridiculous, and it's absurd that they're sort of doing a tribute to a fascist. It's just hilarious and ridiculous.
One of the things as well that never gets picked up is the suffragettes. It is widely understood had almost no impact at all on women's voting rights, which were very much just due to demographic changes, and especially after the First World War and so on.
Yeah, and men, of course, got voted because of the First World War. Men under 30 who didn't own property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also
it all changed.
They developed a pen that women could operate.
Big for her.
Yeah.
1928 it was, by the way, absolute universal suffrage. So quite a long time after they're talking about. It'll be the anniversary soon. I've been wondering whether the country will survive long enough to commemorate 100th anniversary of women voting. It'll be an interesting experiment.
Another thing regarding this attack on the painting, because they've previously sprayed things that can be wiped off. This is an actual physical attack on the painting. They smashed the glass. They used plastic hammers, these polypropylene hammers.
Yes.
They're made from oil. It's like, if anything, they're demonstrating exactly how vital oil is and how many uses it has in society.
In case case of emergency.
It's like an advert for oil. My hammer's made from oil.
It's too small a word for it. It's liquid vandalism. Leo, we have news from Germany now in the Telegraph. I'm sure this will be reassuring to the nation's remaining Jews.
So the Anne Frank Kindergarten will be renamed, and they're saying it's to be more diverse. It's probably because they don't want it to be burnt down. We've got rising anti-Semitism across Europe, obviously, over the past month.
All those pesky Nazis.
The trouble is, if they change the name of the Anne Frank Kindergarten, how are people going to find it? But yeah, they're going to change it to the World Explorer Kindergarten in order to be more inclusive. I mean, the irony is, I guess, that we've seen this growth of anti-Semitism across Europe that echoes, a lot of what was happening in 1930s Germany, which Gary Lineker, funnily enough, despite calling everything that isn't like 1930s Germany, has refused to do that about this.
It's funny, isn't it? People talk a lot about horseshoe politics, but there's some extraordinary examples of it going on in Germany now. It's more like a sort of Chinese puzzle of interlocking horseshoes about who is and isn't on the side of the Jews, I guess.
Yeah, this is shocking, isn't it? World Explorer Kindergarten, another peak quote, to be more exclusive. How does excluding Anne Frank make you more inclusive? Pathetic. And it was quite worrying. I mean, why do they want to get rid of this memory? It is worrying with the rise in anti-Semitism around the world. I do find it. It's not a massive example, but it's just another example.
Well, they go, immigrant families had often never heard of her. Well, there's a learning opportunity then, isn't there? It wouldn't take that much time and effort to explain.
That's kind of why you need things named after her.
Yeah, it's like they might not have heard of Gladstone. So you go, oh, Gladstone, he was the Prime Minister.
People are thick now. They haven't heard of anything. I mean, that can't be the metric.
Oh, God. Daily Mail now, Nick. Football has been slammed by a charity that claims to be worried about brain injuries, so slamming would seem to be a slightly counterintuitive.
Good point. This is a football stubborn refusal to put players' health above all else is blasted and indeed slammed, as you say, by brain injury charity Headway. All sorts of puns there. After Harry Maguire played on against Fulham despite suffering a blow to the head and appearing dizzy, but we did get the win, and that's the most important thing, 1-0. So, Man United fan, of course. But, yeah, I mean, look, this is a problem with football. If you can't take heading out of the game because it'll destroy the game completely. Then again, it's giving people brain damage, especially those people that played in like 1966 and when the balls were just giant orange medicine balls. But it's still an issue. And I think the issue is a little bit as well that you don't really sign up for it. In boxing, you get battered and you get brain damage and you can die, but you go, that's what we've signed up for, and they accept it. So football is more of a gentleman's game, which has this aspect of heading which will destroy your brain. So it's tricky.
American football, they give them all a cognitive test before they start their careers, and then they use another one at the end to see whether they've been significantly. But
you know what else they give them? A helmet.
You could, of course, just fake it, couldn't you? The other way around. It needs to be sort of in reverse. Do you know what I mean? You need to be incentivized to do well the second time. I find it a bit odd that unless the players are just not.
Do they get money if they've got thicker?
Yeah, that would be the implication, because then they could get compensation. But you
could just sniff glue your entire American football career.
Well, you could just deliberately get some questions wrong, but maybe they do it subtly.
Don't they just scan their brains to see how much damage there is?
Oh, maybe that's how they do it. Yeah, that's possible. Well, no, apparently they give them like a 40-minute IQ test, and that's how they do
They're
it.
Probably not smart enough by that point to try and get it wrong deliberately.
I played a bit of Sunday League about 4 or 5 years ago, and I actually literally stopped because of the heading. Because if you're not willing to do the heading, you can't really take part.
We play five-a-side.
It would give me a headache and a neck ache for like the rest of the day. It's quite if you're trying to give it some welling.
We play five-a-side once a week. I keep it on the deck, like Brian Clough said. Football's played on the grass, not in the sky.
That's part 3 done. Coming up in the final section, we have frustrated mothers, stay-at-home fathers, and exhausted grandparents. 3 separate stories. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for the final quarter. Daily Mail now, Leo, and an answer to the eternal question, what do women want?
So British women want one more child, but the cost of having them, affordability of care and anxiety about overpopulation puts them off, according to this study. So they looked at women aged between 18 and 35, so your sort of key years, and they wished their ideal number of children to have would be 2.35. Overall, nobody wants like 0.35 of a child. But in reality, the average is 1.5. So just they're a child short. And it's interesting that the cost. Obviously, there's a lot of cost associated with having a child. I've got a child myself. You got to feed it and look after it and stuff. But I think the thing that really affects people is housing is so expensive in this country. And also, if you put your child in a nursery, my kid goes to nursery. It's brilliant for the kid, but it's hugely expensive, and it's not tax deductible, and you pay VAT on top of it. It's insane. And the overpopulation thing is interesting because on one hand, people are worried about the impact on the environment of having kids, but on the other hand, we're being told, oh, we don't have enough kids in this country, so we've got to import everybody from the Middle East and wherever else.
I mean, it's very encouraging that women even theoretically still want to have children, because you could get the impression that women were just losing interest entirely in the whole business of motherhood, but I still think it is quite a powerful instinct.
That is encouraging, but what's sad is, 88% of women aged 18 to 24 and 49% between 25 and 35 childless, which seems quite high, but only a tiny fraction of 13% and 14% respectively said that they'd ideally have no babies. So as you say, they want to have them, but they're not. And why? Well, it's probably the lie of feminism. It's the lie of the culture that you can wait forever, which biologically you can't. And it's the Malthusianism of the overpopulation argument, which we now know to be exactly wrong, and it looks as if birth rates are actually too low. So it's just very tragic that these societal influences have given women completely the wrong idea.
And there are still people, there's a whole generation of people who think that it's an overpopulated planet, but the reality is the best chance we have of solving the problems that we confront ecologically and so on is by having some genius child that will, will work it out for us. That's our best guess, at this point.
But there's also supporting your own economic systems, and the theory is that we don't have enough birth rate to do that.
And supporting yourself. I mean, I see amongst my friends, women in their 30s, so many of them are basically alcoholics. They're taking antidepressants. They're unhappy. They're indulging in inadvisable sexual contact all the time. That's how I meet most of them, and that's not true if my wife's watching. But that, like, when you have a kid, the thing that you're not told, you get told all this stuff in the media that's, be single, spend your money on other things, blah blah blah, live your own life. Having a kid is the most incredibly enriching and wonderful thing.
The one thing that I think would help as well is it gathers momentum. If your mates all have kids at the same time, then it enriches it even further, doesn't it? Whereas if you're isolated by your mates by having a child, that's, an issue as well. So it is just a question of turning that into the majority again.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nick, staying with the Mail, we have one of the many catastrophic knock-on effects downstream of lockdown.
Yeah, soaring truancy rates at schools are partly down to parents working from home who are ignoring their obligations to get kids to go to school. This comes from a charity, the Sutton Trust. And this is shocking. 22.3% are estimated to be persistently absent in 2022 and 23. And you go, what is going on here? And partly they're saying it's because mum and dad are at home. So what? If my mum was at home, she would still cart me off to school. So there's a strange, something has gone wrong.
I guess what they're saying is, if you were going to work in the morning yourself, there might, not for everyone, but there could be just like a little bit of a go. If you're going to work in the morning yourself, you make sure the kids are into school before, and then you go on to work. Whereas if you're working from home, you might yourself start to slip into getting up at 9 a.m. and do you know what I mean? And doing a Zoom call.
They're talking as if school is a creche, which maybe now it is, but the idea is not just that they're there because you're out and they have to be somewhere. It's to learn some stuff.
But I think there might be just a few...
Yeah, that's why it's happening, but it's not acceptable.
No,
but lockdown broke society, and this is what we have.
Yeah, and I think this just reveals the truth that we all knew, that teachers are glorified babysitters.
Well, there is some truth to that, isn't there? And I suppose if you go fully down that route, you might say it's not necessarily a disaster, depending on what sort of quality of TV they're watching at home. But
homeschooling is better, so there is that, if they're actually doing that.
I don't suppose they will be, though, will they?
No, it doesn't sound like it.
Also, Sir Peter Lample, that's not... What sort of a word is that? L-A-M-P-L? It sounds like an act. Anyway... Independent now, Leo. British men are no longer going Dutch.
So UK tourists to the Netherlands are down 22%. After an Amsterdam campaign urging Brits to stay away. So it's down 22% compared with 2019 before the pandemic. But basically this online campaign, it's triggered when people in Britain enter keywords such as stag party Amsterdam, pub crawl Amsterdam and cheap hotel Amsterdam. And you can imagine these aren't going to be the people. Not your high wealth, high value visitors.
Coffee shop, that's the old euphemism.
Art gallery, that's the ones you want. Warning videos pop up featuring young men staggering in the street, being handcuffed and fingerprinted and having their mugshots taken, and describing the risks and consequences of drug and alcohol consumption. Which, to be honest, I don't think would put any of these people off.
It was always a weird mix. I've been to Amsterdam on a couple of stag do's, but like men in their 30s, and we weren't disgraceful. But it was interesting because there's some really fine, high artistic kind of offers there, and then there is the absolute dregs. It is. That's part of Amsterdam's charm. I think it'd be a shame if they clean up entirely.
Yeah, it's bizarre. We've covered this before when they introduced this campaign. It's such a weird campaign. It's been successful, so we're not going anymore. They're kind of like the ultimate libs. They sound like Remainers on steroids. The Dutch. Like, we can't have you here like with your stag do's. And so now I'm never going. I'm boycotting the country because I'm very highbrow, but I'm boycotting it. I've never been, never will because of this. If they don't want us, it'll make no difference. But
also, you've got to watch out as a right-wing person because I think Dominic Samuels went there, did mushrooms, and then had a great awakening.
I don't want that.
Is now a left-wing guru.
Yeah, I want to stay conservative and square and not take drugs. Yeah.
Daily Mail, Nick, and talking of things like not going to Amsterdam anymore, other things old folks no longer do as well.
Yeah, this is adults reveal the things they're too old to deal with anymore, and being out past 9 p.m. is a no-no. That's when I get started. Ludicrous. But some of the other things are hangovers and drinking. I do get that. You get the 3-day hangover. That is very tough to work as much as I do. I basically can't drink anymore. And they're saying events starting past 9, as we said. Concerts without assigned seating, yes. I agree with that one. Lack of sleep, social media. And some of them are just saying we can't be bothered having arguments anymore. like not like proper debates, but just stupid arguments. And I do get that. They're saying that, you know, Keanu Reeves apparently just, if someone says to him 2 + 2 is 5, he just goes, "You're correct, have a nice day." Leo could try a bit of that, but his Twitter wouldn't be growing as much. And I've even dropped grudges. I used to have more grudges than Morrissey, but I've now just...
Really?
I can't be bothered. I've to an extent.
Yeah, you've still got more grudges than anyone I've ever met.
Yeah,
I'll tell you one thing, and this goes for debates or argument as well, and for music, but I can no longer stand venues where the background music is too loud.
Yeah.
That's a definite, and that is an ageing thing. And I think when you're younger, you think it's a choice, but it's not. You just cannot function in that environment anymore.
Have a conversation,
Yeah. Anyway, we've just got 30 seconds to fit in the last one, which is a good reason for invading Poland for a change.
Yeah, this is brilliant. So lads fly to Poland for a Lidl food shop to prove it's cheaper than the UK, even with the flights. So they went to the Clapham Lidl. It cost 165 quid. So they got flights to Poznan in Poland and saved 67.72 on their food shopping. And even with everything they had to pay for, they still saved £11.
Amazing, and probably a good deal less chance of getting mugged on the way out as well, I would imagine. I've never been to Poland. I'm starting to fancy it a bit. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the good news is by 2030, Poland's going to be richer than us. So, you know, this won't be the case anymore.
It's going to level out anyways.
Yeah, and their price will be astronomical.
The show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail, poppy seller 78 punched by protesters. The Times, thousands to be spared cancer with 4p a day pill. We have the Sun, Eco Harry flies to Katy Perry gig in oil tycoon's jet. The Mirror, Michelle Mone shock. Finally, she admits PPE link. The iNews, Green King forced to announce shredding of eco policy. That's Charles, not the brewery. Metro, 300,000 get drug to avoid breast cancer. And those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. I'm back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Leo Kearse again and Josh Howie. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. If you've been staying up with us tonight, thank you very much for your company. I do wish you the very merriest of dreams. Good night.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.